Hello. It's time to get started. Barry is going to need every second. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's good to see everyone here, see the friendly visitation that we got going. Houston and Sydney are back off of their vacation. It's good to have them back with us. But Barry Hatcher, he's a missionary in several places, but mainly Indonesia. And he's going to talk about the work in Indonesia. And we've been knowing him a couple of years anyway, since 75, I think. And he's been doing a good work in everywhere he goes, and we appreciate Barry. He'll tell you more about his work here in just a second. So let's start with a prayer. And Caleb, would you lead us in a prayer, please, sir? Amen. Okay, Barry.
Morning. Appreciate the elders allowing us to come. My wife Melanie is sitting back here beside Reba. Bobby didn't want to say, but 100 years ago we were in middle school preaching together. And Bobby has been to what you're about to see. He's been out to Indonesia 5 times and has spent several weeks each time there. And we appreciate them and have had a appreciation relationship with them for many years. I have a lot to say, and I fail to say it in 45 minutes. Bobby says that if I don't, I'm fired. But I told him my sermon is only 5 minutes long, and therefore you'll fire him and hire me, right? I report, with my newsletter, I report by email, and they already get it. So I'd like to pass this around while I'm showing the slides. If you'd print your name and print your email address if you want a newsletter, if you read those things. If not, pass it on. But if you would print your email address in all capitals, I know to put it in small letters. Then I can read and distinguish between I's and L's and ones and things like that. So if you'll print carefully and do that for me. And again, if you don't want the newsletter, then just pass it on. But by the time the lesson is through this morning, we'll have that done. Melanie and I started going to Jamaica back in 1980, and then I became a director or campaign director for campaign teams in Jamaica. And this was our background to go overseas full time. We had wanted to do mission work, and we decided that we would. But one of the things that we discovered about Jamaica which was our experience, is that when men graduated from the Jamaica School of Preaching, brethren in the States put them on salary. And we didn't find, being on salary, that they were actually doing the kind of work they needed to be doing unless someone was there on the field at the time, all the time or at the time. We would baptize 25 people and go back the next year, and there wouldn't be anyone there because they hadn't. The men who were being paid by brethren in the States were not really doing the job. Not all of them were like that. Just a few of them we found. Well, this is in the background of who we are. And so when we went to Indonesia, our purpose was not to work with one congregation or establish a congregation. We wanted to work with many congregations and establish congregations if we could. So we decided to establish a preacher training school. And this preacher training school now is in its 31st year because we moved to Indonesia in 1987. And the school, after we learned the language and began to work with the language, we then started the school in 1989. But it took us that length of time to learn men who were good men, the men who we asked to participate as teachers were graduates of Four Seas College in Singapore. Brother Ira Y. Rice established that school many years ago. It's a good school, faithful school. And so we began our work that way. Barbara, help. Indonesia, of course, is located north of Australia, and it is the fourth largest nation in the world. You have China with more than 1 billion, India with more than 1 billion, the United States with 340 million now, and Indonesia with 280 million. It is the largest Muslim country in the world by population, but they are not under Sharia law except for one province. They are a democracy, and therefore we are able to preach the gospel there to some extent, except in some of the hotbeds of Indonesia. The eastern border of Indonesia starts in the middle of Papua New Guinea, and it runs 3,500, 600 miles to the outer islands of the island of Sumatra. There are 17,000 islands that make up Indonesia. In the island of Java, and I think I've got a better map right here, yes. The island of Java right here is the size of Georgia. And Georgia has how many people now? I know that the population has increased, and maybe 6, 7 million people. 10 million? Did I hear 10 million? Here 12, going once, going. My wife's going to get me for that. But there are 132 million people who live on that island. And that's somewhere around 3,200 people per square mile. It is one of the most densely populated places in the world. And of course, if you've never heard or didn't know where Indonesia was, you've heard of Jakarta. Jakarta is the capital city or the mother city of Indonesia. When we moved to Indonesia, this is the layout of where the congregations were. The church was 30 years old. It began in northern Sumatra and in the city of Medan in 1957. And Brother Rice had a lot to do with that at that time. If you know anything about Brother Rice, Ira Rice, and they encouraged men to go there, and they started the work. And so they had the school of preaching in Singapore, and so a few brethren started to go to Singapore. But this is how the church laid out in 1987 when Melanie and 3 children and I first moved to Indonesia. We were living on the island of Java and Jakarta. We eventually started the school a year and a half or so later on the southern tip of Sumatra. Sumatra is the 6th largest island in the world. It's 1,000 miles long, 1,100 miles long, about 300 miles long and wide at the widest part. And so that's where we settled 31 years ago with the preacher training school, and we started the work. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14, the Apostle Paul made the comment, he says, "Now thanks be unto God, which always causeth us to triumph in Christ, and maketh manifest the savor of his knowledge by us in every place." And of course, the idea is that we need to go to every place. But we don't need to do all the work. We need to go train men and women to do the work, the Lord's work for themselves, but not only that, to train them to train others themselves. So we wanted to train trainers, and therefore our interest was to establish the preacher training school in this way. Brother Alex Daniel is the director of the school. I was the director for the first 2 years, mentored him. He's a fantastic person. He and his wife have worked with the school since its beginning. These 2 brethren here are graduates of our school. They're also graduates of Four Seas College, and they do a great job in the work in teaching, and they are full-time with the school. We have some part-time instructors, and they're very helpful and do a good job as well. We can handle up to about 17, 18 students in the school. It's a 3-year program. Now, initially it was a 2-year program, and our curriculum is basically patterned after the Memphis School of Preaching because that's where we went. But then we expanded it because of their needs and their culture to 3 years. And it's been 3 years now for about 15 years. And so our students get a lot of Bible, a lot of opportunities to study, and we're grateful for that. Here's Alex teaching in the classroom in our old school building. We're no longer in southern Sumatra, and I'll make a few comments about that in the future. Here's Rita teaching the ladies. Melanie has done a lot of work in that area when we lived there. She taught ladies and helped the ladies learn to teach other ladies and teach children. And that's why we're there. We want women in the school. We also want them to marry the preachers. And a number of them have, because in a Muslim environment, although it's a democracy, it's really good to have a couple who are working together, knowing the scriptures, and helping to establish congregations and work with them. The ladies have their own chapel on Fridays. That way they get to practice preaching to ladies. And they are able to do other things as well. Melanie started having ladies' days there. Now they don't have to have us. They don't have to have an American lady go over there and have ladies' days. They have their own ladies' days, and that's what you're seeing here. Melanie started had a retreat as well, and we're hoping that in time they'll start having retreats themselves. I think there are ladies from 7 Islands and sisters from 7 Islands. And by the way, every person you're seeing in these pictures were not Christians in the year 2000. They weren't Christians in the year 2000, but maybe in 1997, since 1997. The school started in 89, but it took a while for our graduates to really make some impact into the work. But everybody you're seeing here were not Christians at that time. And when at that time, of course, they've become Christians. We also have an extension of the school and congregations because we have graduates in congregations, and they can teach courses. We have a curriculum for them to teach, a 2-year curriculum. Of course, it's not as extensive and what that we have in the school, and so, but it's good. And you see, they go all out in the congregation. This is their graduation, and they're wearing robes and the cap because they do that there. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, the Apostle Paul says, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Well, we wanted to teach them to teach the Bible. We wanted to teach them to train other people. And we wanted to teach them to be evangelistic and to do the work of evangelists. But we also wanted them to teach the members to be evangelistic. And I am a full-time instructor with Fishers of Men as also. And when I took Fishers of Men to them in 1997, we began to see a change in the work in our graduates. And so our students take the course 3 times while they're in school. Every year they're in school. And now we're talking about having it twice a year while they're in school, and so that they get evangelism training so that they can go out and teach the gospel, having prospects as well as teaching members how to do the same. This is when I left, I was there the whole year of 2020, almost the whole year of 2020, to build new buildings in another place in Indonesia. And this was the student body who was moved to this place. We have 4 who will graduate, but now we just had, July starts the new year, and we've just had a new recruitment session, and so this is how the school looks right now. We have first, second, and third year students in this picture. And by the way, I've shown these slides in a number of places, and brethren come up to me invariably and says, how old are these students? Because they look like they're 16 years old. Well, the youngest is 20 and the oldest is 35. In Asia, people don't look their age, and it's the hardest thing in the world to determine their age. But, the oldest is 40, because we have just for the first time have a couple, Brother Frankie and his wife Deanna. They are married, have 3 children, and it's the first time that we've been able to have a couple to be in the married couple to be in the classes. We've always had single folks, and after they graduate, then they seem to get married to one another. Not all of them, but some of them in that area. Here's the classroom. Brother Carlos is teaching. He's a part-time instructor there in Manado. We're no longer in Sumatra. Here are the 5 graduates, and they will be leaving that picture I think next month, and for their graduation. Here's a sister in the congregation who teaches English, and we have 4 quarters of English. Now, they speak more than 300 languages in Indonesia and 750 dialects. And so all of our students come to us knowing 4, 5, 6 languages because of the languages around them and the different tribes, because there's more than 300 tribes there. And but they don't speak English. And we want our preachers to be able to research good websites such as Christian Courier and Apologetics Press, because we want our preachers not to just go into the work, in the local work, having their notes from preacher training school. We also provide books that have been translated by the staff. And we want them to be able to research their lessons and take the congregations deeper in their study of the Bible than just their notes from the school. And the school teaches us how to study. It doesn't teach us everything in the Bible. And so this sister teaches English, and they take it 4 quarters. And when they get out of that, they can, when they finish that, they're able to read it, and so therefore they're able to go on to these websites. And they're also doing that in class now. The technology has come up. Everybody in Indonesia has a computer. You know, these little handheld things that once in a while you talk into it. That's a computer, as you know. Everybody has one. You can go to the mall over there, and a 4-year-old's walking down the mall with a handphone. They call them handphones over there. And so this is our new library room. We have quite a few books, somewhere around 2,600, I think, or 3,000 books, but they're in English. And we have worked hard to provide an English library for the staff, because the staff must be able to speak English so that they can go and have the resources to take it into the classroom as well. And so we have that. Also, the translation work that they have done has increased the Bahasa Indonesia, which is the national language, that's the language we speak, has increased the number of volumes to around 500 because of the translation work that we started in the very first quarter of the first year, 31 years ago. And so, because that's a very important part. You go into a foreign country, doesn't speak English, there are no books there. And by our brethren, we needed that. So here's some of the translation work that we've done, books that they've done over the years, more of that. One of the priorities is to translate books that will help the staff teach in the classroom. So the students get books related to the particular subjects that they're taking every quarter, but they have to be translated. Brother Paul Sane gave us permission to translate his Bible class material. Here are just a few of them, and that's from small age on up to through adult. Also, they write tracts. The third year of our curriculum, 2 quarters, is really keys on research and writing. And so our students are researching and writing, and so the men do articles. And if they're good enough, we put them into tracts. And so we'll have tracts here, and so that the brethren can hand those out and use them in that way, and which we are hopeful for. Jesus said, "Go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature," and so we want them to be evangelistic. And so this was, as you saw this slide before, you saw this is about 30 congregations that existed in 1957 through 1987 when we moved there. We started the school, and this is what it looks like now. And the congregations, we now have graduates. We have 105 graduates, that's men, who are in the mission field now, and we don't pay them. They work for themselves. We have 11 congregations, however, who have started supporting their preacher fully. We have 2 congregations who have actually sponsored graduates into the mission field in Indonesia. Didn't come from the States, and that's what we want. So when our men graduate, they know that they don't receive funds from the United States. They go back to their villages or wherever. And so now we have these 105 are in 67 congregations. Now, the reason for that is that we have recruited 3 or 4 men from a particular village, and those 3 or 4 men go back to that village because that's where the job is until something else can happen. But we've had 37 of our graduates now to go out into other places and start their own congregations, maybe near those villages. And so that's why you're seeing the growth of the congregations in this area and over in this area and this area now. And we hope, because we have now moved the school to the eastern side of Indonesia instead of being here, we hope that we'll be seeing more and more people and more congregations grow there. We're not opposed to supporting men. We have supported 12 men, but we didn't support any new men out of school. We asked men who had been in the mission field 4, 5, 6 years or more. And in 2000, we began to take 2 families together, and they were the husband and wife. They were men who married some of the women, one of the women in the school. And you have a couple here who are graduates of the school, and another couple working together, and we put them in the 6 cities. Brethren, there are many cities in Indonesia, millions of people, no congregations. And they were not gravitating to these places because they knew no one, knew anyone, and they wanted to go back so they could have a job in the rice fields or wherever they might be working in a village, and then preach the gospel. So we chose 12 men and put them in by twos in the 6 places, and started that in 2000, and by 2010, 10 of those families were off support. And I attribute that to the fact that they were not on support from the states before. Of course, they were being supported through our work. We now continue to support 2 men part-time. One of the brothers we support part-time, we didn't support for a while, but then he moved to a place and he needed some support because there was no opportunity for work, but we needed the Lord's church to grow there, and so we helped him part-time. There was a congregation and they're helping the other part. But more than 2,000 members of the church, people have obeyed the gospel since 2000 or 2001. We also have a youth preacher training camp. Of course, we didn't have it last year, but as the churches grow and the numbers grow, our numbers grow with the things that we're doing. And so we have young ladies in the classes. This is the one in 2019. We have the boys, for a week from Sunday to Sunday, they study all kinds of things from the curriculum of the school, and they preach on the second Sunday. The girls, they learn how to make visual aids and teach children's classes, and they can take this back to their village and to their mothers and give them some information about things and help them with visual aids and teaching children, and they have an opportunity to teach classes. The next 15 slides I'm going to rapid fire, but every person you see in these slides were not Christians in 2001, except maybe 1 or 2 of the preachers. Every congregation you're about to see was started by one of our graduates, and none of American money did this. They've done it for themselves. So here's one. This is in Bali, and one of our graduates there works there, and if there's a baby around, my wife will be holding it. This is the newest congregation. This is where we now have moved our school, and we have I spent almost a year there to build these buildings, the dormitories and the school building, because we had to get out of Sumatra because of Islam. And but this congregation, staff and students, when I was there, I came home February the 6th, but now Alex told me that they're now meeting about 60 in their services. And this congregation now has started raising money among Indonesian congregations to put a missionary in the field in Makassar, southern Sulawesi, and this is North Sulawesi in Manado. This is that same congregation. The opportunities in Manado are great because this is the only province in Indonesia that is not predominantly Muslim. And in where we were in the province of Lampung, on the southern tip of Sumatra, the Muslims in that province began to push for Sharia law, and they began to do things. But then, because the government in 2005 had given the northernmost province, Banda Aceh, autonomy, because they had fought a bloody rebellion for 30 years, and the government apparently finally said, okay, you can be autonomous, and you just pay your tribute to us because they're oil rich. You can do what you want to, and they went under Sharia law. That's what they wanted to do. Well, that caused people in the rest of the island to want to go under Sharia law. Now, they don't want to fight about it, but they do things. One province, any woman that's in the province, they passed a law, I think it was in 2010, that any woman in the province, whether you're a tourist, and it's a big tourist area, or you're non-Muslim, but if you leave your hotel, you leave your house, you have to be in a burqa. And then they separated the beaches, which is not a bad thing, I understand, but for tourism, and it's the greatest surfer place in the world. There's surfers everywhere, but it won't be for long. And then our province began to restrict where you could build a church building, and only you could build a church building if you had 30 faithful members within a kilometer of the church building, living within a kilometer of the church. So many things. They then began to run ads in the newspaper saying that if you are a non-Muslim, these are neighborhoods you cannot rent or buy a house. And then we now have discovered that they have an ISIS base there. And of course, the northern tribe, they had training camps for Al-Qaeda there over in the 80s and the 90s there. And so it began to ratchet up, and the problems we were facing, teaching fishers of men. I don't know, have you had fishers of men here, Bobby? So you know you have to go talk to people. Well, we've had students to be mobbed, knives pulled on them, and it really discourages the ability for them to get the kind of training we want them to have. Here's the kind of training we want them to have. We want them to have prospects in Bible studies every week that they're in 3 years of school. You know, with a preacher training school, the local congregation should benefit because our preachers should be very evangelistic. Well, they'll be evangelistic because of the training, the fishers of men training that they get. And we're now thinking about going every other quarter teaching fishers of men, because that's a momentum to get people out talking to people, because you have to perform. You have to do that in order to make your grade in the class. And this is something that we want them to have that experience. And plus, doing that, taking these classes, they become proficient and they can become instructors in it. Then when they go out into the field, they'll teach the members to do that. And when we see people, we engage them in discussion. We will DIADIQ them. Many of you know what that is, or all of you may know what that is. Engage them in Bible discussion, get them in Bible studies. And so that's very important. We were not able to do that for almost 30 years. We were able to do some, but not all of that. We've been teaching fishers of men for a number of years, but it wasn't like this. But Manado will provide that. It is 70% Protestant. It's the highest education index, and that's interesting because men and women, boys and girls, have a great opportunity of education there. There are no objections to building religious buildings for religious purposes. There are a couple of congregations there, and that's been helpful. Many of the members have university degrees. That's been helpful instead of just coming out of the village, and so we've been grateful for that. We purchased the property, and so we moved from southern Sumatra to North Sulawesi. North Sulawesi, kind of a funny-looking island. And so we moved 2,200 miles away. We did that in December of this past year, and so now they're in their third quarter in their new facilities. But here are two of our students. One of them is a third-year student. He'll be graduating in Bible study with two young ladies. Here's a sister. She's a senior, and in Bible study, she's in red. Elvin is in red. Here's another in another Bible study, in another Bible study, in another Bible study. Here's Brother Alex Daniel in the Bible study. Here's one of the other staff, Brother John Ropilemba, baptizing his prospect. Brethren, a preacher training school should be doing this. This is what we should be trained to do this. Trained all the time, constantly, because when we leave here, when we leave the school, we need to be evangelizing. It's wonderful to have preachers, but it's great to have evangelists. And it isn't confined to just the preacher. And so we want preachers who are evangelists, and we want members who are evangelists. And so it's so important. So our outlook for the future of Indonesia with teaching people the gospel is now greater by having moved to Manado than it was if we had stayed in Sumatra, because of the prospective work that these men and women will do after they graduate. And here's the school building, and it's also the top of this floor. This is where the large auditorium is that you saw earlier. And this is the girls' dormitory. It's a mirror image of the boys' dormitory, and it's right at the end by the kitchen. The kitchen's over here. The library is right here on this side. And this is the men's dormitory. It also has, the girls' and the men's dormitory has an apartment. Half of it is an apartment where two of our staff members, Team Bull and John, live with their families. And the kitchen area, the dining area, a big kitchen that's much larger than what they experienced before. And the boys live in a kind of a barracks type style living in their dormitory. The girls, they have 4 bedrooms, and so they have that. Of course, we usually have more boys than girls, so that was for that purpose, and it's very large. So we hope that in the future, this side of the country, the eastern side of the country, will begin to look like this in time. We were also concerned, well, what about congregations supplying us with preachers from here, or with students from here, sending them 2,000 miles away over here? Well, we have 4. We had 8 to come to the school to start it this month, or in July, this past July, and 4 of them were from that side of the country. So it's not going to prohibit them from travel. And we don't provide their transportation. The congregations and their families, they have to provide the transportation. We try to do nothing for them financially that they can do for themselves. We don't build buildings. Will we help with a building? We've helped with 2. The men know, because motorcycles are a workhorse in Indonesia, and they can get 4, 5, 6 people on a motorcycle. Right, Bobby? And it's great. And the motorcycles are 125 cc. That's because of so many people. That's as large as basically they'll allow. But they know that I will ask brethren in the States, individuals, to help me buy a motorcycle for our preacher. And we have bought 9. And that's how many men have asked me for a motorcycle. They do things for themselves, and we want them to continue. I wish I had time to tell you more stories about all the contributions, financial contributions, that people who are poor, who actually live in homes with the chickens, but what they give. It's wonderful, and we're thankful to that. But there's still a lot of work to do. There are more than 40 cities in Indonesia with 1 million or more people with no congregations. So we hope that we can continue to just churn out these preachers, continue to churn out these ladies who will be good Christian wives for our men, and they'll go into the work and do it well. All right, I finished early. Or no?
Tell us about, before you just go, tell us about how you began, where you began. You showed us some beautiful buildings there. Tell us what you started with, how cooking of those bushes like that.
Well, when we moved there, of course, one of the congregations was out in Sumatra when we decided to move to Sumatra. There was a congregation about 70 miles outside of the city where we finally built a building and were there for close to 30 or 27 years. But for 3 years, we were in a small congregation building. It had an auditorium, and it had a hallway and 2 little rooms on each side, and that was our schoolroom. And so what we did was went out and we rented 2 houses, and we put the four girls in one house with the lady cook, sister in Christ, and we put the men with one of our staff in another house, and so that's how we began. And so that's where Bobby went to speak for 2 weeks the first time. It was the first year. It was in 1989 when he came out, and I made this side, this little room over here. It was not much bigger than this right here. We had a computer, and I put a bed in there, and so I would come out and spend the week. Now, my family lived in Jakarta, so I would come over and spend the week there, and I would stay there until the police said, "Mr. Berry, it's too dangerous for you to be out here by yourself at night." So then I had to stay in a hotel and drive out every day. And that's when when they came. By that time, we were staying in a little cheap hotel in that way. Any other questions you have? I do want to tell. Go ahead.
What kind of effect has the pandemic had on that particular part of the world?
I just learned day before yesterday from Alex Daniel, the director, that Indonesia is number 1 in the most deadly in the pandemic now. Everything is red. A month ago, Manado, where the school is, was green. A lot of it was green, but it's changed. And so it is number 1. Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, a lot of those Asian countries, they're all closed. I couldn't go back there for a visit if I wanted to right now. And it would be very difficult to do. I'd have to at least stay in the hotel for 14 days, pay my own way, have somebody bring me the food. I mean, it would be just very difficult. Same in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, so they're facing all that right now. But one of the things is that will help them is that when a person tests positive, as soon as he tests positive, the government gives him a packet of things, of over-the-counter drugs like Robitussin, vitamin C, zinc, and stuff, which we should have been doing in 2020. And our doctors didn't tell us that. But Indonesia was doing things like that. I brought home with me, maybe I shouldn't tell you about this, but I brought home 30 days worth of hydroxychloroquine. I have it. I wish Donald Trump had said, "Don't take it." We'd all been okay. Yes.
What are your yearly, how much does it cost to run the facility there?
It runs about $9,000 a month to pay for everything because the students come and everything's free. This is where this is what we're dealing with there, but from that has come everything else. And we're below budget, but that's because we're still coming out of 2008. Is that the second bell? That's for. Thank you. Yeah. Who had?
I would be afraid, if there's so much Sharia law and stuff like that, I would be afraid to go out and evangelize. Is there any way, because like people under Sharia law, from what I've read, they don't want to be talked about.
Well, they're not under Sharia law except for that one province right now. The others are doing things to push for it, and the ISIS base, the national terrorist unit is dealing with it. Alex told me that the local government, the provincial government, they're silent. They want it. They want it because they want to allow that to push toward autonomy. Once they get autonomy, then they can go under Sharia law. And so that's why we had to leave there, because we didn't know what our students were going to be facing. In Monado, it's wonderful because the people, Protestants there, feel like toward Muslims as like Muslims felt toward us in Sumatra. And so it's really great. But I want to tell you this story. I mentioned it to Bobby. In 2014, there was a 100-year flood in Monado. One of our graduates lost his house. I hope I can do this without emotion. Several of the members had damage in their homes, and so they were living in the church building. And Alex emailed me and said Monado has problems, and he sent me pictures of the floods and the damage. I sent a newsletter out with the pictures. In 7 days, we had $7,000 from brethren and congregations. And so didn't hear from them and for a month. And I said, Alex, what's going on? I haven't heard from Carlos. And Carlos is one of the part-time instructor you saw up there. He has a PhD, and he helps in certain areas. He's not a graduate of the school, but in certain areas that are non-biblical in a sense. And right now, but he's about to retire and then go through the school. But anyway, he said, I'll check with him. He checked with him. The next morning, I got an email. I got an email from Carlos. I don't know why this makes me emotional. But he said, thank you. Don't send money. The brethren in Indonesia took care of it. I've worked in Africa, Jamaica, Mexico, and there would have been brethren saying, yes, send that money. They could have said that, and we would have sent it. Well, we turned around and sent all 7,000 back to everybody who had participated because we could. I'm so grateful I've been able to work with these brethren. Thank you.